Lopez, 37 years old, takes Olympic gold and a new Olympic best time. But now, what about the race for silver and bronze? Spedding is trying to close, but it's not going to happen. The green vest of Ireland, worn by John Tracy, who takes the silver medal. And for Great Britain, a fine bronze for Charlie Spedding against Helen Harris.
John Tracy winning a silver medal in the most arduous athletics event in the Olympic Games, the marathon. But contrary to popular belief, he's not actually our most successful Olympic marathon runner. More about that later. As an estimated 13,000 people set off to run the Dublin City Marathon tomorrow, with thousands more cheering them on, I wonder how many will have the energy or the inclination to reflect on the origin of the event. 2,500 years ago this very month, against all odds, 10,000 Greek soldiers defeated about 30,000 Persians at the Battle of Marathon. Legend has it that the victorious Greeks sent a runner out to spread the good news, and that he did. He ran about 150 miles in 2 days and then unfortunately dropped dead. That's the fable. Here to unveil the ancient truth is Dr. Suzanne O'Neill of Trinity College, along with sports sociologist Dr. Cyril White of UCD, who has an interest in the modern revival of the race. Suzanne, the story of the Battle of Marathon itself is for another day, because it's the aftermath of the victory that interests us here. But where does legend depart from the facts? Did this long-distance runner, Phidippides, did he actually ever exist? Did he do what he's supposed to have done?
Well, I believe Phidippides did exist. The legend later came that he ran from Marathon to Athens. But interestingly, Herodotus, who's the father of history, it's the early known prose account of critical history ever written, he tells us that Phidippides ran from Athens to Sparta, which is a distance of about 150 miles.
So fair dues to him for dropping dead at the end of that. You wouldn't be really surprised.
No, you've got it slightly wrong there. The later ancient historian Lucian, then tells us that Phidippides ran from the Bay of Marathon to Athens and dropped dead when he gave the victory message. But actually, what Herodotus tells us, who was writing at the time, well, about 40 years after the event, says that he ran to Sparta to ask them to help the Athenians in the battle at Marathon. But the Spartans didn't come because it was a religious festival and they wouldn't march out till the full moon. So Phidippides runs back to Athens and then goes to the Battle of Marathon.
And where does the 26-mile distance then come into the equation? Is that actually the distance, do you know, between the plains of Marathon and Athens, or is that a 19th century invention?
The actual distance from Marathon to Athens is just over 24 miles. And what I understand is, in the 1908 Olympics, when it was held in London, they created the 26-mile distance because the marathon began at Windsor Castle and ended at the White City Stadium in front of the Royal Box. So they added the extra couple of miles to ensure it finished in front of the Royal Box.
And the Greek victory at the Battle of Marathon, it was very important not just for Greece, but it was important for European civilization, wasn't it?
Absolutely. John Stuart Mill said that this victory was more important for English history than even Hastings was. So what we all derive from Marathon now, what many historians, political commentators derive from Marathon, is that was the crucial battle that preserved the philosophy, political culture, the democratic culture of ancient Greece, which then formed the basis of Western civilization as we know it now. Western European civilization.
Cyril, there's been many eventful Olympic marathons over the years and a couple of bizarre ones. Give us a potted version, first of all, of the 1904 event in St. Louis.
Well, this was a complete and utter disaster. They decided to run a distance, and we're not really too sure how far they ran, but it was on a very dusty old track in which the officials and the press were in cars in front of the runners, which meant, of course, the runners were running into dust and all over the place. One of them, a man by the name of Lors, an American, decided after about 12 miles he had enough of this, so he took a ride in the car. But after about 22 miles, he decided to join in again. And, of course, he got into the stadium first. Everybody cheered him on. He was practically wined and dined as the winner. And then they found he wasn't the winner.
He'd taken a lift.
He had taken the lift, yes, in the car. The two others who won the gold and the bronze medal, Hicks and Arthur Newton, were actually English. But they were running for the United States. The great story about those games was the competitor from Cuba Carvajal was his name, lost his money in a card game in St. Louis. Not St. Louis, but New Orleans, and had to actually hitchhike to the race. So he arrived just as the race was about to start, and he had boots and long trousers, and Martin Sheridan asked to hold on a minute.
The great Irish
Olympic champion from Bohola in Mayo. He got a scissors and actually got most of the legs off the man's trousers so he could run. But this was a complete disaster, but very funny.
And 1908 then, Suzanne has already referred to it. What actually happened in 1908? Because a lot of people associate the 1908 with the 385 yards of that extra 385 yards that everybody curses. Who was a king? It was King Edward. It would have been Edward VII.
Yes, it was.
The king.
Yes, and Queen Alexandra,
explain what happened there.
Well, the race, as has been described, started, of course, in Windsor Castle. And it was to start in front of the royal children so that they could see the actual start. It was due to finish in the Olympic Stadium, which afterwards was the White City Stadium, and that was approximately 26 miles. We're not sure as to how they measure these things, so it has to be approximate. Yes. But the royal box was 385 yards from the actual regional finish, so they just ran the 385 yards round, and that became the marathon distance in 1924. And to this day, every Olympic marathon is actually measured 26 miles, 385 yards, whereas every other one is measured in metres.
Oh, of course. What happened then at the 1948 London Marathon? That's a great story.
Yeah, well, actually, I saw this myself. Into the stadium came Etienne Gallet of Belgium, and he was in a terrible state. He was a light shade of greenish yellow, and he was as near to me as I am to you. And I didn't think he was going to make the finish, though he was in the stadium. Well, he staggers along, and at about 200 metres to go, into the stadium comes the Argentinian Cabrera, who was very much South American, mustachio, white teeth, waving to everybody, to be met by complete silence. He didn't know what had happened. And, of course, everybody there wanted Gaye to win. Well, Cabrera went after him, and around about 100 metres from the end, he passed him. And at that time, into the stadium came Tom Richards of Britain. So I won't say the British, but the spectators now wanted Richards to try and catch him, which he did about 50 metres from the finish. But Guy actually made the finish, and then all hell broke loose. There was doctors and nurses and oxygen and stretchers and everything.
But he got the bronze.
He got the bronze, but he was never able to accept the bronze, and he never ran a marathon again.
Very briefly, just to refer back to what I said at the very beginning, in Irish terms, John Tracy's silver medal in 1984 was well eclipsed by another Irishman in 1912, Kenneth MacArthur from Dervuck in County Antrim.
That's right. And he was running for South Africa. He was a policeman. He was the tallest marathon winner ever. He was 6'3", and he weighed 13.5 stone. And it was a very hot day. But that particular race produced all kinds of things. We had the first actually death in the Olympics in that particular marathon, sadly. But the main thing was that a Japanese who actually didn't finish, had a rest, fell asleep, came back 48 years later and completed the marathon. And it took him 54 years, 8 months, 32 minutes and 20.3 seconds to finish the marathon.
Even I beat that, for God's sake. And very briefly, Suzanne, what's happening in Greece to mark the 2,500th anniversary of the Battle of Marathon in 10 seconds?
Well, they're running a marathon next week on the historical course, the mythical historical course, and also they've struck commemorative coins, a €2 coin, which features Pheidippides and a shield and a bird to celebrate the foundation of Western European civilization.
Okay, so a big day in Athens.
It's a big day.
On the 31st of October, this day week. Suzanne and Cyril, thank you both very, very much.